Unaware that the wife he had just insulted was minutes away from closing a $10 billion deal, the husband stood in the middle of his own living room, breathing hard, his hand tight around the handle of a dirty plastic bucket. Brown, soapy water dripped down the sides. His mother stood behind him with her arms folded, her lips pressed in a hard line. The woman who had quietly held his whole life together, cooking, cleaning, staying up late with a laptop that he thought was just online shopping, stood in front of him in a simple blue dress, holding a neat folder to her chest. Before she could say another word, he tipped the bucket forward. Filthy water splashed over her head, ran down her hair, her face, her dress, and over the folder she had been clutching like it was life itself. Papers inside it bent and soaked through. For a second the whole room went silent, except for the sound of droplets hitting the marble floor. His mother let out a small, satisfied laugh under her breath. The wife blinked water out of her eyes, breathing slowly, staring at the two people she had loved and trusted the most. She did not cry, she did not scream. She just straightened up, water still dripping from her eyelashes, and said in a steady, quiet voice, "You have no idea what you just destroyed." Before we go deeper into this story, please like this video and subscribe so you don't miss any of our life-changing stories. Where are you watching from? Drop your country or city in the comments below. Chapter 1. The night before the dirty bucket moment, the house was quiet in a way that made the walls feel heavy. The city lights outside painted soft lines across the living room, but inside everything felt dim. The air conditioner hummed, the clock on the wall ticked. In the small home office near the stairs, a woman sat at a wooden desk with her hands on a laptop and her eyes burning from staring at the screen too long. Her name was Rachel, she was 32 years old, and the folder beside her held the printed summary of something that could change her life forever. It was the same folder that would be soaked through by dirty water the next day. Rachel pushed back her curly dark hair and took a deep breath. Numbers and lines filled the screen, contracts, emails, messages with powerful people whose names most people only saw in news headlines. She moved the mouse slowly, reading over the final terms of a partnership agreement. Her small tech company, something she had started on their kitchen table with a cheap laptop and a head full of ideas, was about to be acquired and expanded by a giant international firm. The total value of the deal sat on the screen in simple black letters: $10 billion. $10 billion. She whispered it under her breath, not because she loved money, but because she could still hardly believe that something she built in quiet could be worth that much. To everyone else in the house, she was just Daniel's wife. She was the one who remembered birthdays, the one who knew where his missing files were, the one who knew how he liked his coffee, the one who listened when he came home tired from work at the small car dealership he ran with his friend. But on this screen, to the people she had worked with for years over emails and video calls, she was founder and CEO BrightPath Systems. To them, she was sharp, focused, and powerful. To them, she was the person who turned a little app that helped small shop owners track their stock into a system now used by hundreds of stores in 3 countries. To her husband, she was simply the woman who spent too much time on that laptop. A message popped up on the screen. It was from Nora, her lawyer and friend. "Final confirmation, signing tomorrow 10 a.m. at the Grand Tower Hotel. Are you ready?" Rachel stared at the message for a moment. Her finger hovered over the keyboard before she typed back, "Yes, I'll be there." Her heart beat faster. She could already see it in her mind: the tall glass building, the long table, the people in suits, the thick contract on the table waiting for her signature. She thought about what this meant. No more counting every cent. No more pretending the rent was just delayed for a few days when it had been weeks. No more feeling guilty for wanting to take her little sister out for a simple meal. $10 billion meant more than just money. It meant security, freedom, choices. It meant her work, her long nights, her sacrifices were real and seen. She closed the laptop gently and picked up the folder. Tomorrow, she told herself. Tomorrow she would tell Daniel. She had wanted to surprise him. In her mind, she pictured his face when she would come home with the signed contract and show him what she had done. She imagined him lifting her in his arms, laughing, saying, "I always knew you could do it." But under that sweet image there was a heavy stone of doubt. Daniel had not been the same for months. As she left the office and walked down the hallway, she heard their voices in the kitchen. Daniel and his mother, Linda. They were speaking low, but the house carried sound in strange ways. Rachel slowed down when she reached the corner, not because she wanted to spy, but because she heard her own name. "I'm telling you, she's hiding something," Linda whispered sharply. She was in her late 50s with a face that always seemed to be stuck halfway between a frown and a smirk. "Every night, laptop, laptop, laptop. What kind of poor man's wife stays up like that? She's talking to someone." "Mom, not again," Daniel sighed. His voice sounded tired. "She says she's working." "Working?" Linda scoffed. "Since when does she work? You are the one paying all the bills. You are the one running around. She just sits there typing. Ask yourself, what kind of work can she do without leaving this house? Who is she chatting with? Maybe she's planning to leave you when she gets what she wants." Rachel pressed her back to the wall, the folder held tight to her chest. Her throat felt dry. She could picture Daniel's face, messy brown hair, worry lines on his forehead that had grown deeper in the last year. When they got married, he used to tell his mother to be gentle, to give Rachel a chance. Lately, he said less and less. "Mom, I don't think she's cheating," he muttered. "Rachel is not like that." "Oh please," Linda replied. "You men are always the last to know. You think she's perfect because she brings you tea and smiles. Open your eyes, Daniel. Look at how she doesn't tell you anything. Real wives are open. Real wives talk about everything with their husbands. She hides her phone, her laptop has a password, she receives calls outside. She only does that during her meetings," Daniel interrupted, but his voice was weak. "She says they are investors from other countries." Linda's voice turned cold. "And you believe that? You think some rich person will just call your wife a woman with no big degree? For business, be serious. She's embarrassing you. You are working hard at the dealership while she plays boss in this house. Mark my words, one day you will see she will tear this family apart." Rachel's eyes filled with hot tears that she refused to let fall. She wanted to run into the kitchen, slam the folder on the table, and shout, "I am not talking to another man behind your back. I am building something for us." But she stayed quiet. She knew how it would go. Linda would roll her eyes. Daniel would rub his forehead and say, "Not now, please, I'm tired." The night before the biggest day of her life, she did not have the strength for another fight. She took a slow step backward and went upstairs instead. In their bedroom, she laid the folder gently on the bed. The papers inside were everything she had worked for. She touched the top page and spoke quietly to herself. "Tomorrow after we sign," she whispered, "you will know I was doing something good for us, you will see." When Rachel finally lay down beside her husband that night, he was already sleeping. Or at least, that was what she thought. His back was turned to her, his body stiff. She reached out a hand to touch his shoulder, then pulled it back. It had been a long time since he rolled over to hold her close on his own. She stared at the ceiling for a long time in the dark, her mind full of numbers, signatures, and her mother-in-law's sharp words. Eventually, sleep pulled her under. Morning came with loud knocking on the bedroom door. Rachel opened her eyes and squinted at the light sneaking in through the curtains. She checked the time on her phone. 7:32 a.m. The meeting at the Grand Tower was at 10 a.m. She had planned every minute. Shower, breakfast, dress, brief call with Nora, taxi. She sat up quickly, her heart beating fast with a mix of fear and excitement. This was the day. "Rachel," Linda's voice called from behind the door. "Come down, we need to talk." Rachel frowned. "I'll be down in a minute," she called back. She swung her legs over the edge of the bed, careful not to wake Daniel, but when she looked at his side, the bed was empty. His clothes were not on the chair, his shoes were gone. She heard footsteps downstairs. He was already up. That was strange. Daniel loved to sleep in if he could. She showered fast and dried her hair. She chose a simple but neat outfit, a cream blouse, dark fitted pants, and a navy blazer. It was not as fancy as what some people would wear to a billion-dollar meeting, but it was clean, smart, and fully hers. She pinned her hair back, looked at herself in the mirror, and whispered, "You can do this." When she came downstairs holding the folder, the living room did not feel like the home she knew. Daniel stood in the center of the room, dressed in a black t-shirt and jeans. His jaw was tight, his eyes dark in a way that made her stomach twist. Linda sat on the couch, arms folded, eyes narrowed, like she was waiting for a show to start. On the floor near Daniel's feet sat a big plastic bucket filled with cloudy, dirty water from the mop. The mop leaned against the wall. The smell of old soap and dust filled the air. Rachel stopped at the last step, confused. "What's going on?" she asked, her voice soft. "Daniel," he didn't answer right away. He picked up the bucket and held it at his side, the muscles in his arm tense. Linda made a small sound, almost like a laugh she was trying to hide. Rachel looked from her husband to the bucket and back, feeling something cold crawl up her spine. "Where were you 2 nights ago?" Daniel asked suddenly. His voice was calm, but there was something dangerous under the calm. At 11 p.m. Rachel blinked. "2 nights ago I was here, I was in my office, you know that, I was talking to the partners in London." "The time difference." "Stop," he snapped, and the word cut the air like a knife. "Stop lying, Rachel." Her hand tightened on the folder. "I'm not lying, you know I have late meetings sometimes. I told you, I showed you the calendar." Linda stood up slowly from the couch. "We know where you were," she said, shaking her head. "You were in a hotel, Rachel, with a man." The room seemed to tilt slightly. For a moment, Rachel thought she had misheard. "What?" she whispered. "Someone sent Daniel a video," Linda said, her eyes shining with something that looked like victory. "You walking into a hotel, smiling, dressed up, with a man in a suit. You think we are fools?" Rachel's mind raced. Hotel, man in a suit. Then it hit her. Last week, she had met one of the company representatives from the international firm at a hotel restaurant for a negotiation dinner. She had told Daniel she had an important meeting, but she hadn't said it was at a hotel because she already knew how it sounded and she had not wanted to fight. They had sat in the lobby first, going over numbers with their laptops open. Everything had been about work. She had left early and taken a taxi straight home. "It was a business meeting," she said, her voice shaking. "I told you I had a meeting. I can show you the emails, the contracts. He's one of the people signing the deal today." "It was not a date. I was never alone in a room with him. We were in the lobby." Really? Daniel asked. His laugh was bitter. Because in the video you look very comfortable, you didn't look like someone in a hurry to come home to her husband. Rachel felt heat crawl up her neck. What video? Who sent it? Show me. Daniel's eyes flashed. So you can explain it away, so you can make me feel crazy again? I'm done being the fool, Rachel. I'm done fighting for a marriage when you are clearly building another life behind my back. Another life? She repeated, confused. Daniel, I'm building our future for us, for you, for our family. I stayed up all night working. I did not go to parties. I did not go on trips. I did not go out with friends. I worked. I've been trying to tell you, but every time I start, someone interrupts me, or you say you're tired, or, oh, now it's my fault, he cut in. Now I am the problem. Linda stepped closer to her son and put a hand on his arm. You don't owe her anything, she said softly but loud enough for Rachel to hear. She doesn't respect you. She doesn't honor your home. She thinks you are stupid. Show her you are not. Rachel stared at the woman who had once hugged her on her wedding day and called her daughter. I have never disrespected this home, she said quietly. I clean it, I cook, I work, I try. I have stayed with you even when you insult me. I have swallowed so many words. I have cried alone in bathrooms so you wouldn't feel bad. How is that disrespect? You sneaked around, Linda answered, her voice sharp now. You met men in hotels, you planned things without your husband. That is disrespect. I am trying to surprise him with good news, Rachel said, her voice breaking. She looked at Daniel, her eyes searching his face. There is a big deal. Merger, the contract is here. She lifted the folder slightly. We are signing it today, Daniel. This is what all the late nights were for. This is why I was in that hotel. It was a business dinner, I swear. I wanted to tell you after it was final so I wouldn't raise your hopes if it failed. $10 billion, Daniel. It will change everything. We can pay off your debts. We can buy a house for your mother. We can help your sister with school. Please just listen to me. There was a long silence. For a moment something flickered in Daniel's eyes. Doubt, hope, memory of the girl he had married who used to dream big with him on old park benches. Then Linda squeezed his arm and leaned in close to his ear. Listen to her, she hissed. $10 billion, does that even sound real to you? She thinks you are a child. She's making a joke of you in front of the world. If she really had that kind of money coming, don't you think people would know? Don't you think she would have told you before? She is lying, Daniel. Don't let her fool you again. Daniel's jaw tight. The soft flicker in his eyes turned hard. He stepped closer to Rachel, the bucket in his hand moving slightly. You really expect me to believe that you, the same woman who couldn't even fix a simple computer when we first met, are now closing a $10 billion deal? He asked quietly. Do you hear yourself? She gulped. The words hurt more than she thought they would. I learned, she whispered. I studied, I tried. You don't know because you never asked. You just saw me on my laptop and assumed I was wasting time. I built something, Daniel, alone, while you were laughing at me with your friends. You built secrets, he snapped. You built walls. You built a life that doesn't include me, so now I will show you what it feels like to be disrespected in your own home. Rachel suddenly noticed how close he was. The bucket was between them, full of gray water from cleaning the balcony that morning. She had seen it when she came down but had not thought anything of it. Now she realized its purpose and a cold fear moved through her. Daniel, don't, she said softly. Please think about what you're doing. This isn't you. You don't know who I am anymore, he replied. His voice was low, almost shaking. But I know exactly what you are. Time slowed. Rachel could hear the ticking of the clock, the drip of water from the mop, the faraway sound of a car horn on the street. She looked into his eyes and saw a stranger standing where her husband used to be. Then, without another word, he lifted the bucket. For a second she thought he would stop. She thought he would see the fear in her eyes, remember their first date, their wedding vows, the nights they stayed up dreaming together, but he did not stop. He tipped the bucket forward. The dirty water hit her like a slap. It was cold and heavy, soaking her hair, her face, her clothes. She gasped as it ran down her neck and into the collar of her blouse. The folder pressed to her chest caught most of it, the papers inside quickly turning soft and wrinkled. Ink bled, important lines blurred. Her blazer and pants clung to her skin. Her shoes squished as water pooled around her feet. Linda's laughter filled the room now, no longer hidden. Look at you now, she said, almost gleeful. This is what you deserve. Maybe now you will remember that my son is not a fool you can play with. Rachel stayed still. Every part of her body wanted to shake, to run, to scream. But she just stood there, breathing slowly. Water dripped from her eyelashes. She blinked a few times to clear her vision. When she finally looked up, she saw Daniel watching her with a mix of anger and something like regret, but he said nothing. Say something, Linda pushed. Aren't you going to apologize? Aren't you going to beg him to forgive you? Rachel looked at the older woman, then at her husband. Then down at the folder in her hands, she slowly opened it. The top pages were ruined, but the main contract was in a plastic sleeve underneath, still dry. Her heart gave a small, stubborn jump. They had not destroyed everything, not yet. She closed the folder again and straightened her shoulders. When she spoke, her voice was calm, so calm that it made both of them blink. You think I came this far to beg, she said quietly. You think pouring dirty water on me will wash away what I've done or what is about to happen? She shook her head. You have no idea who you are trying to crush. Oh, so now you're strong? Daniel scoffed, but his voice was not as sure as before. Now you talk like some big boss. No, she replied. I have always been strong, you just never wanted to see it. She stepped back from the small puddle of water, leaving wet footprints on the floor. Her clothes clung to her skin, but she walked like she was wearing a crown. She went to the hallway, grabbed her small black handbag from the hook and slipped the soggy folder carefully inside. "Where do you think you're going?" Linda demanded. Rachel turned back to face them. Her eyes were no longer sad. They were steady, clear, and sharper than they had ever seen. "I'm going to sign the deal you just tried to destroy," she said. "The deal you called a lie. The deal that will show the whole world who I really am and who you really are. If you walk out of that door," Daniel said slowly, "don't come back." The words hit her like a punch to the chest. For a second, she almost choked on them. This was the man she had cooked for, prayed for, worried about. The man she had waited up for when he stayed out late with his friends. The man she had defended when people laughed at his small dreams. He was now choosing his mother's lies over her truth and using their home like a weapon. "Are you sure you want to say that?" she asked quietly. "You are choosing this moment, this lie, over everything we have built together." Linda stepped in front of her son like a shield. "He said what he said," she snapped. "You heard him. If you go, stay gone. We don't need you and your secrets here." Rachel nodded slowly. Her heart ached, but something else rose inside her too, a new kind of strength. "You're right about one thing," she said. "You don't need me. You never saw me. You saw a maid, a cook, a free secretary. You never saw the woman who was building you a lifeline." She looked at Daniel one last time. For a flicker, his eyes softened, but he clenched his jaw and looked away. "Go," he muttered. "Go and enjoy your fake $10 billion. Rachel didn't answer. She turned, opened the front door, and stepped out into the bright morning. The sun hit her wet clothes, making them feel even colder, but the air outside tasted like freedom. Tears burned behind her eyes but did not fall. She walked down the front steps with her wet hair sticking to her cheeks and her clothes clinging to her body, holding onto her bag like it was the last piece of solid ground she had. As she reached the gate, her phone buzzed inside her bag. She stopped, wiped her wet hand on the side of her pants, and pulled it out. The screen showed Nora's name. Her thumb trembled slightly as she answered. "Rachel, are you on your way?" Nora asked. Her voice was bright, excited. "They are all here, the board, the main investors, the press team. They're ready. This is your big moment." Rachel looked back at the house. She could see the curtain move slightly, someone watching her from inside. Maybe Daniel, maybe Linda, maybe both. She turned her face away and took a deep breath. "Yes," she said into the phone, her voice calm and clear. "I'm on my way." "Everything okay?" Nora asked, catching the strange tone. "You sound different." Rachel gave a small, dry laugh. "Everything is about to be more than okay," she said softly. "Just make sure the contract is ready, and Nora." "Yes." "Once we sign," Rachel said, her eyes fixed on the road ahead, "I need to add one more thing to the agenda. Something about changing the name on a certain house deed, and making sure some people learn the hard way that you don't pour dirt on the hands that were building your future." Nora was silent for a second, then let out a low whistle. "Whoa, okay," she said. "Now I'm really curious. Hurry, we're waiting. And Rachel, whatever happened this morning, leave it at the door when you walk in here. Today you walk in as the most powerful person in the room, remember that." The call ended. Rachel slipped the phone back into her bag and flagged down a taxi. As she climbed in, the driver gave her a strange look, eyes taking in her wet clothes. "Madam, are you okay?" he asked carefully. She met his eyes in the rearview mirror and gave a small, tired smile. "I'm better than I look," she answered. "Please, Grand Tower Hotel." The taxi pulled away from the curb, leaving the house and the people who had just thrown her away behind. Inside the living room, Daniel stood at the window watching the car go. The empty bucket sat on the floor beside him, still dripping. His mother stood at his side, smiling in quiet satisfaction. "You did the right thing," Linda said softly. "Now we can find you a real wife who respects you, you'll see." But as the taxi turned the corner and disappeared from view, a tight, strange feeling twisted in Daniel's chest. For the first time since he lifted that bucket, a small voice inside him whispered a question he didn't want to hear. What if she was telling the truth? He pushed the thought away, but it stayed like a small stone in his shoe he couldn't shake off. He had no idea that, a few miles away, the woman he had just drenched in dirty water was about to walk into a room full of cameras, lawyers, and billionaires. And that when she picked up a pen and signed her name, his own world would begin to crumble in ways he could not yet imagine. The taxi moved steadily through the busy streets, the morning sun rising higher, warming the windows, while Rachel sat very still in the back seat, watching buildings blur past. Her wet clothes stuck to her skin, leaving her shivering even though the car was warm. She could still feel the weight of the dirty water running down her scalp, dripping into her collar. She pressed her palm gently against her chest where the folder rested inside her bag, and for a moment she let herself breathe slowly, telling her heart to stop racing. Each breath felt heavy, like it was carrying all the words she could not speak in that living room. She replayed Daniel's face in her mind, the anger, the disbelief, the way he held the bucket as if punishing her was something he had been planning. She tried to remember the man who held her hand on their wedding day, the man who promised to protect her, but the image kept blurring into the stranger who stood with his mother while pouring dirt on her dreams. Yet despite the pain, something inside her felt strangely calm, like a storm that had passed and left only cold air behind. She did not know if that calmness was strength or shock, but she leaned into it, letting it settle in her bones. The taxi slowed at a red light, and she stared out at people walking by, businessmen with briefcases, children in school uniforms, a woman selling flowers. She wondered if anyone could look at her and guess what she had just walked through that morning, but no one paid her any attention. She felt invisible and powerful at the same time. The driver glanced at her through the mirror again, his eyes soft with concern, but she looked away before he could ask any more questions. She did not want pity. She wanted to rise. When the taxi finally approached the tall glass tower that touched the clouds, Rachel felt her pulse pick up again. The Grand Tower Hotel shimmered in the sunlight, its entrance lined with tall potted plants and shiny black cars pulling up in waves. Security guards in dark suits stood near the doors while staff in neat uniforms hurried in and out. It looked like a place where only people with power belonged, and she, soaked and shaken, felt like she did not fit, but she straightened anyway. She forced herself to remember that her name was on the contract. Her ideas were what built the deal. Her signature was what everyone inside that building was waiting for. She paid the driver and stepped out of the car, water squishing softly inside her shoes. A soft breeze brushed against her wet hair as she approached the entrance. A bellman stepped forward to open the door but paused, staring at her soaked clothes before quickly masking his surprise and giving a polite nod. She returned the nod and walked inside. The lobby was enormous, with shining floors, tall ceilings, and soft music playing from hidden speakers. People in suits moved quickly through the space, talking into phones or flipping through files. As Rachel walked across the marble tiles, she felt every eye on her, or maybe she only imagined it. But either way, she kept her gaze forward, taking slow, steady steps like she had rehearsed her whole life for this moment. The elevator doors opened with a soft chime, and she stepped inside, pressing the button for the 28th floor. As the elevator rose, she closed her eyes for a second. She could almost hear Linda's voice echoing in her head, calling her names, laughing at her wet clothes, calling the deal a lie. She let the voice fade. When the doors opened, she walked into a hallway lined with golden lights and large framed photos of famous entrepreneurs shaking hands with presidents, actors, and world leaders. It was a place built for people who changed the world, and she, in her wet clothes, was about to join them. She approached the conference room door where two women in black suits stood holding tablets. One of them smiled when she saw Rachel. "Miss Carter?" the woman asked. "They're waiting for you inside." Rachel nodded, though she felt her stomach twist. She reached for the door handle with a wet hand and stepped inside. The room was huge, with glass walls showing a view of the entire city. A long table stretched across the center, and at least a dozen people in suits looked up as soon as she entered. There was a brief silence. A few people exchanged quick glances. Her wet clothes stood out like a siren. At the far end of the table, Nora stood up so fast that her chair nearly toppled over. Her eyes went wide. Rachel walked forward slowly, feeling the weight of every stare in the room, but she kept her head high. "Rachel," Nora whispered as she rushed to her side, taking her arm gently. "What happened? Are you okay?" Her voice was soft with worry, but she kept a professional calm because everyone in the room was watching. Rachel gave a small nod. She didn't trust her voice yet. Nora squeezed her arm once, a silent message of strength, then guided her to the front seat. One of the board members cleared his throat, trying not to stare at the water dripping from her blazer. "Miss Carter," he said, standing to greet her, "we're honored to have you. Are you sure you're ready to begin? You've had quite a morning, I assume." His voice was polite, but she could sense the underlying question. Would a woman who came in soaked be capable of handling a $10 billion deal? Rachel smiled faintly, though her lips trembled. "I'm ready," she said softly. Her voice was steady. She reached into her bag and pulled out the folder. Some papers were warped and wrinkled, but the main contract remained perfect inside its sleeve. She placed it on the table with careful hands, ignoring the water that dripped from her sleeves onto the polished wood. Nora took a step forward to stand by her side. "Before we start," she said, her voice strong and confident, "I want to say something. What Miss Carter has built from the ground up is nothing short of extraordinary. She worked on this company at night after her full-time responsibilities at home, turning a small idea into a platform used by thousands. What you see in front of you is someone who has fought through more challenges than most of us can imagine. Her arriving today, regardless of what she faced this morning, shows dedication beyond any definition in the business world." Some of the board members nodded, their expressions softening. A few even smiled. Rachel blinked back heat behind her eyes and took a deep breath. She had walked through shame this morning, but she was not going to walk through weakness here. The next hour moved like a powerful wave. Lawyers explained clauses, board members reviewed projections, and Rachel spoke with a calmness that surprised even herself. Every time she opened her mouth, her words carried weight. She explained the future potential of BrightPath Systems, its current growth patterns, and her expansion strategy. People took notes, people nodded, people listened. Inside that room, no one saw her as a housewife with a wet outfit. They saw her as a visionary. During one presentation slide, she caught her reflection in the glass wall. Her wet hair curled around her face, her blazer clung awkwardly to her shoulders, but her eyes were sharp, focused, determined. She looked like a woman who had been pushed to the ground and still stood higher than anyone expected. Halfway through the meeting, an assistant entered quietly and set down a tray with a warm towel and a cup of hot tea in front of her. It was such a small gesture, but it nearly broke her. She whispered a thank you and wrapped her hands around the warm cup, letting the heat seep into her fingers. It felt like someone telling her she was safe here. As the meeting neared the moment of signing, Nora leaned in and whispered, "After you sign, everything changes. You don't have to go back to anything that broke you." Rachel didn't answer. Her eyes shifted to the contract. That single signature would decide everything: her future, her freedom, her power. She reached for the pen on the table, her hand trembling slightly, not from fear but from the weight of the last 12 hours. Just as she touched the pen, her phone buzzed inside her bag. A loud buzz, then another, then another. The room went quiet. The vibration didn't stop. It was almost urgent. Nora frowned slightly. Rachel swallowed and gently pulled out her phone. The screen glowed bright with missed calls. 10 missed calls, all from Daniel. Her heart thudded. This was not the man who told her to stay gone. The phone buzzed again in her hand, a direct call coming through. The sound echoed slightly in the quiet room. Everyone looked at her, waiting. Rachel stared at the screen. The room felt colder again. The world went slow. Daniel's name blinked over and over. She turned the phone face down. Everyone waited to see if she would answer. Nora whispered, "You don't have to pick up." Rachel breathed slowly and slid the phone into her bag. "I'm ready to sign," she said. But the moment she lifted the pen, the conference room door swung open. Hard. Everyone turned. Daniel stood in the doorway. His hair was messy, his chest rose and fell fast, and his eyes swept the room until they landed on her. His face carried panic, regret, confusion, and something else: fear. His mother wasn't behind him this time. He had come alone. The room fell into complete silence. Rachel's fingers stiffened on the pen. Daniel stepped inside slowly, as though afraid she might run or disappear. His voice cracked when he said her name. "Rachel, please." His shoulders sagged. "Please don't sign that." Her blood turned to ice. He took another step. "I made a mistake. I know I did. Please, I need to talk to you." Everyone in the room looked from him to her, unsure if they should intervene. Rachel stood slowly, the pen still in her hand, but she did not go to him. Her voice came out quiet but steady. "You poured dirty water on me, Daniel." His eyes squeezed shut like the words physically hit him. "I know," he whispered. "I know, and I'm so sorry. I shouldn't have listened to my mom. I overreacted. I didn't." His voice cracked. "Please just come home. We can talk. We can fix this." Rachel didn't move. Inside her chest, a slow fire burned. He took another step toward her, ignoring the stares from the board. "I was wrong, Rachel, completely wrong. Someone sent me a fake video. I checked it again. It was edited. I realized it this morning after you left. I tried to stop you, but you were already gone. I shouldn't have believed my mom. I shouldn't have." He couldn't finish the sentence. His voice broke again. "I'm begging you, please come home." Rachel looked at him for a long moment, tears burning the back of her eyes but not falling. Then she spoke. "Home." Daniel nodded quickly, reaching a shaky hand toward her. She took a slow step back. "That wasn't home," she said softly. "Not anymore." Daniel froze, his hand suspended in midair. "I came here soaked, humiliated, shaken," she said in a voice that filled the room. But these people saw what you never did. They saw my work, my ideas, my worth. You saw me typing in the dark and thought I was wasting time. You saw me grow and believed lies instead of asking questions. You poured water on me because your mother told you to. His lip trembled. I didn't mean to hurt you. But you did, she whispered, and you didn't stop. Nora placed a gentle hand on Rachel's shoulder, reminding her she was not alone. Rachel looked down at the contract. And then at Daniel. Her voice softened but did not break. This moment was supposed to be shared with you, she said, but you chose to stand with someone who wanted to destroy me. Daniel swallowed hard. Please don't do this. Rachel lifted the pen. The entire room held its breath. But before she could sign her name, someone's phone buzzed loudly. Another phone followed. Then another. People started checking their screens. A woman gasped. A man muttered, "Oh my God." Nora grabbed her phone and her face drained of color. Rachel looked at her sharply. What happened? Nora swallowed and turned the screen toward her. A video was playing. A video of Rachel. Soaked. Standing in the living room. Her husband pouring dirty water on her. His mother laughing in her face. The moment captured from outside a window by a neighbor's security camera. And it was already online. Already viral. Already everywhere. Someone whispered, "This is trending on every platform." Another said, "People are calling for her to press charges." Another murmured, "The world thinks she's walking into this deal like a warrior." Rachel stared at the screen. Her humiliation. Her pain. Her betrayal. The world saw everything. But what she didn't know yet. The world had already chosen a side. And it was Daniel. She looked at Daniel. He looked like he had been punched in the soul. He whispered, "Rachel, please." But she didn't answer. She simply lifted the pen again. Her hand hovered over the signature line. Her heart pounded so hard it hurt. And right as she lowered the tip of the pen to sign, the conference room door opened again. This time, the person who entered was Daniel. It was someone else entirely. Someone whose arrival would twist the entire story into a new direction. Someone who would make everything even more complicated. And everything was about to change again. The person who walked into the room was a tall man in a dark gray suit with silver hair at his temples and calm eyes that seemed to notice everything at once. He moved with quiet confidence, the kind of confidence that did not need to shout to be seen. A small pin with the logo of the buying company rested on his lapel. The board members straightened when he entered, some nodding, some whispering softly. Nora pressed her lips together like she had been waiting for him. He shut the door gently behind him and walked forward, his shoes soundless on the floor. When he reached the head of the table, he looked at Rachel first, then at Daniel, then at the contract lying open. "I see I've walked in at a very important moment," he said in a calm, steady voice. "Forgive the interruption, I had to handle something urgent before coming up." One of the older board members cleared his throat and said, "Mr. Lawson, this is Ms. Rachel Carter, founder of BrightPath Systems." "Ms. Carter, this is Grant Lawson, the main partner in the acquisition and chairman of Lawson Global Holdings." Rachel had seen his face in online articles, business magazines, and on the company's website. He was the man whose signature would sit beside hers on the biggest deal of her life. She had imagined meeting him clean, composed, and confident. Instead, she was standing there half-dry, still wearing clothes that had been soaked with dirty water, with her husband begging her not to sign and a viral video of her humiliation spreading through the world. She swallowed hard but kept her shoulders straight. Grant gave her a small nod that was almost respectful. "Ms. Carter," he said, "thank you for being here." Then his eyes shifted to Daniel. "And you are." For a moment, Daniel looked like a child who had been pulled into the principal's office. He straightened his shirt and said, "I'm her husband. I needed to speak to her before she signs." Grant's eyes did not move from his face. "I see," he replied. His calm tone did not change, but there was a hard edge deep inside it that made the room feel colder. The board sat silent, waiting. Phones still buzzed quietly here and there as people tried to pretend they were not watching the video that was spreading like fire. Grant glanced at one of the screens nearest him, saw a frozen image of Rachel standing soaked in her living room with a man tipping water over her, and then slowly looked back at Daniel. "You must be having a very busy morning," he said, his voice now flat. "It seems half the world is talking about you." Color drained from Daniel's face. He looked at Rachel, then the table, then the floor. "I made a mistake," he murmured. "I came here to fix it." Rachel's hands tightened around the pen. The whole room waited to see what she would do. Grant turned slightly toward her, his expression softening. "Ms. Carter," he said, "before we go any further, I want you to understand something very clearly. We invited you here because of your mind, your work, and your character. We saw how you handled partners in tough negotiations. We saw how you treated small shop owners with respect when you built your system. We saw how you responded to stress, how you spoke to your team, how you carried yourself. That video going around," he paused, choosing his words carefully, "does not change any of those things. If anything, it shows us something else, your strength." Rachel blinked. She had been ready for people to see her as weak and pathetic. She had not been ready for this. Grant nodded toward the contract. "From a legal standpoint, the deal is solid. From a moral standpoint, I need to ask you something, not as a businessman, but as a human being." He folded his hands on the table. "Do you want to move forward today? We can postpone, we can give you time, we can rearrange the press conference. We will not force you to sign anything while you are under this kind of emotional pressure." The way he said it made it clear she had the power here, not them. Not Daniel, her. The whole room looked at her again. Rachel thought of the house she had just left, the way the dirty water had poured over her head while Linda laughed, the way Daniel looked at her with disgust and called her a liar. She thought of the nights she sat alone at the kitchen table, working while everyone slept, her fingers cold on the keyboard and her eyes burning. She thought of the neighbor's camera that had caught her worst moment and thrown it out into the world, not knowing it would be the match that lit a fire she had been too afraid to start herself. She looked at Daniel, who was staring at her with desperate eyes now, like his life depended on what she would say next. In some ways, it did. "I want to move forward," she said quietly. "I work too hard to stop now. This company is not just my project, it is my heart. It helps people who are trying to survive. It turns small shop owners into people who can stand tall. I will not let what happened in my house this morning decide the future of what I built." Nora smiled faintly at her side. Some of the board members nodded. Grant's lips curved in the smallest hint of a smile. "Then we move forward," he said simply. He turned to Daniel. "Mr. Carter, you've made your request, you've given your apology, but right now this is a closed business meeting. You are not on the contract, this is not your deal. You may wait outside or you may leave, but you may not interfere." Daniel's jaw clenched. "She's my wife," he said quietly. "I made a mistake, but I love her. I can't just stand outside while she signs everything away. She's not thinking clearly." Rachel's head snapped toward him. Warm anger rose in her chest. "Not shouting anger, clear anger. I am thinking more clearly than I ever have in my life," she said in a low, steady tone. "For years, I have shrunk myself to make other people comfortable. I have stayed quiet to keep peace that didn't exist. I have hidden my growth to protect fragile pride. Today, that stops." She pointed gently at the contract. "This is mine. I built it." For a moment, Daniel looked at her like he didn't recognize her. This was not the woman who begged for understanding in the kitchen or followed him around asking to talk. This was not the woman he could silence by rubbing his forehead and saying he was tired. This was someone new, or maybe this was who she had always been and he had refused to see it. Something like fear passed over his face. One of the security staff from the hotel stepped in quietly, placing himself by the door, waiting for a signal. It was a silent reminder that if Daniel refused to leave, someone would help him. He glanced at the guard, then at Rachel, then at the phones around the table still glowing with the video of his cruelty. For the first time that morning, he realized that maybe he was not the victim. Maybe he was the one the world would point at as an example of what not to be. His shoulders slumped. "I'll wait outside," he muttered. "Please, Rachel, after this, can we talk?" She did not answer. That silence was louder than any word. He lowered his eyes and walked out. The door closed behind him with a soft click. The room exhaled. Grant looked back at Rachel. "Shall we?" She took one more breath, then picked up the pen. Her hand hovered over the paper again. The letters of her name waited like an empty path. She remembered the night she came up with the idea for Bright Path. The power had gone out in their small apartment. She had sat with a candle and a notebook, thinking of how her mother, who ran a little grocery store years ago, used to struggle to keep track of stock and credit. She remembered how people from the big supermarket chains would talk down at small owners, treating them like they were less. She had wanted to build something that gave those small people strength. That was why she started. Not for $10 billion, not for boardrooms, but for people like her mother. She pressed the pen to the line and wrote her name slowly, letter by letter. With each stroke, something heavy lifted from her chest. When she was done, she put the pen down and sat back. For a moment there was silence. Then the room filled with the sound of hands coming together in applause. It was not loud, but it was full. Nora squeezed her shoulder, whispering, "You did it." A few people came forward to shake her hand. Flashbulbs popped as the press team, who had been waiting outside, were allowed in for quick photos. Through it all, Rachel stayed grounded. Her clothes were still slightly damp, but her eyes were bright. She felt like a boiled seed breaking through the surface of the soil. Grant signed his part and the lawyers added their signatures. The thick contract was now not just an idea, it was real. BrightPath Systems had been acquired and expanded under Lawson Global, and Rachel Carter had just become one of the most powerful women in the tech space. While the team began to discuss the press statement and how to present the story to the world, one of the younger assistants hurried over to Grant holding a phone. "Sir," she whispered, "it's everywhere, the video. People are talking about domestic abuse, power, and resilience. Some of the comments are calling her a symbol. They're already asking if she'll speak out." Grant listened, then turned to Rachel. "There is something else we need to talk about," he said. "The world doesn't just see your product now, it sees your story. We could hide from it, or we could decide how to handle it." Rachel frowned slightly. "What do you mean?" He leaned on the back of a chair. "We can keep your personal story completely private and focus only on the business. That is your right, or we can allow a controlled amount of truth. You don't have to go into details you don't want to share. But if you choose, we can stand beside you publicly and show the world this company stands against what was done to you this morning. It would protect you, not expose you. People are already forming opinions without hearing your voice. This is a chance to tell your story on your own terms." The thought made her stomach flip. The idea of strangers seeing her worst moment already felt raw. The thought of speaking about it in front of cameras felt like standing naked in the street. But then she thought about all the women and men who had messaged her quietly over the years, talking about controlling partners, about feeling small, about staying silent because of what people would say. She thought of her own mother, who once stayed with a man who broke her spirit because she had nowhere else to go. She thought of how she herself had stayed, swallowing insults like bitter pills. "If I speak," she said softly, "it has to be real. I won't pretend it did not hurt, and I don't want it to be about revenge. I want it to be about waking people up." Grant nodded. "Then we'll do it your way. We'll put you in charge of the narrative. You decide what to say and what to keep just for yourself." Nora smiled. "You've always wanted BrightPath to be about giving people power," she said. "Now you can do that on a bigger level, not just with numbers but with courage." Rachel inhaled slowly. She nodded once. "Fine," she said, "I'll speak, but not today. Today I just need to breathe." "Of course," Grant agreed. "We'll schedule something when you're ready. For now, we'll simply announce the acquisition and release a short message about how proud we are of you." After the formalities were done, after the signed copies were placed in envelopes and the photographers were guided out, Rachel stepped aside to the floor-to-ceiling glass and looked down at the city. Cars moved like tiny toys. People walked like dots. Somewhere in that messy, noisy grid was the small street with the house she had just left. Somewhere on that street was a bucket still lying tipped over on the floor, water spreading in ugly patterns. She wrapped her arms around herself. The deal was done. Her company had been lifted into a new world, but a part of her still felt like the girl who went to sleep beside a man who did not see her. Nora joined her by the window. "You don't have to go back there," she said gently. "We can get you a room here for a few nights. You can rest, think, stay away from all the noise." "I still have things there," Rachel replied softly. "Clothes, papers, memories." She stared down at her reflection in the glass. "But you're right. I can't walk straight back into that house like nothing happened. I don't think I can even sleep under that roof tonight." Nora nodded. "Then you won't. Our firm has a partnership with the hotel. I'll arrange a suite. You'll have privacy, room service, and time to think." Tears finally pricked at the corners of Rachel's eyes. It was not just about the room, it was about someone looking at her and saying, "You deserve safety." She swallowed and nodded. "Thank you." As she gathered her bag to leave, her phone buzzed again and again. She didn't need to look to know what it was. Messages from unknown numbers, notifications from platforms, calls from relatives. Daniel called again. She put the phone on silent and tucked it away. One of the company's drivers escorted her down to a private elevator that opened into a separate part of the hotel reserved for special guests. The suite they gave her was larger than their entire apartment. Soft cream walls, wide windows, a big bed covered in white sheets, and a living area with a couch that looked like it had never been sat on. When the door closed behind her, the silence felt almost too big. She walked to the bathroom and saw herself in the mirror properly for the first time that day. Her hair was messy and stiff with dried water. Her clothes were wrinkled in strange ways. There were faint red marks on her skin where the cold water had shocked her. Slowly, she stripped off the wet clothes and stepped under a hot shower. The water flowed over her head, down her back, washing away the smell of dirty soap. It felt like she was rinsing off not just the bucket but years of quiet hurt. She pressed her head against the tiles and let herself cry at last, not loud, not broken, just deep, steady tears that carried everything out of her chest. Later, wrapped in a soft robe, she sat on the edge of the huge bed. Her phone flashed with more notifications. For the first time since the signing, she opened one of them. It was a message from a number she didn't know. "I don't know you," it read, "but I saw the video. I've been in a similar position. I never had the courage to leave. Watching you walk out that door made me feel like maybe one day I can too. Thank you." Another came from one of the small shop owners who used BrightPath. "My sister sent me the video," he wrote. "I didn't realize it was you. You have helped my business so much. You don't deserve what happened to you. If you ever need support, my family is with you." More and more messages like that filled her inbox. People she had never met were pouring out support because they saw one small piece of her life. She wiped her cheeks and took a shaky breath. pain mixed with something new, a strange, quiet pride. While Rachel rested in the hotel, the world outside moved fast. The video of her humiliation was still spreading, but now it was being shared with a different tone. People weren't laughing, they were angry, and not at her. Strangers uploaded videos saying things like, "No one deserves this," and "Look what some people go through behind closed doors." Hashtags with her name and words like "Stand strong" and "Walk away" began to trend. When news sites found out that the woman in the video was the same woman who had just signed a $10 billion deal, the story exploded even more. Headlines popped up on websites. Tech genius walks out on husband after public humiliation, signs billion-dollar deal hours later. Some called her the woman who walked through dirty water into a clean future. Others called her a symbol of self-worth. The media did what the media always does, they picked the most dramatic angle. But under the drama, something real was happening. People were having real conversations at dinner tables, in group chats, in small shops, in offices. They were talking about how many women and men carried silent pain behind closed doors. Back on the small street where the Carters lived, life did not stay normal. Neighbors had already seen the police car that drove by to check on a disturbance earlier. Now some of them had seen the video too. People who used to greet Daniel with friendly waves now stared from windows or looked away. At the car dealership where he worked, customers showed each other clips on their phones. One man pointed at Daniel's picture on the staff board and said, "Isn't that the guy who poured water on his wife?" Another customer said, "I don't feel comfortable buying from someone like that." Complaints started to reach the owner of the dealership. Calls came in asking why they employed someone who treated his wife like trash. Staff who had once laughed with him at lunch started sitting at different tables. Some looked at him with pity, others with quiet judgment. Daniel felt it everywhere he went. Shame settled on his shoulders like a heavy coat. At home, Linda sat on the couch with the television remote clutched in her hand. Her eyes were fixed on the screen as a news anchor spoke over a split image. One showing Rachel in the conference room, signing a contract with business leaders, and the other showing Rachel soaked in the living room while Linda's own laugh echoed in the background. They had blurred Linda's face slightly, but people who knew them would recognize her. "This morning, millions of people woke up to this video," the anchor said. A woman humiliated in her own home just hours before she became one of the most powerful players in the tech world. Many are calling her walk out of that door an iconic moment of strength. Linda's mouth hung open. "They're making her look like a hero," she whispered. "They didn't see the other side, they don't know what she's like." But even as she spoke, a small, uncomfortable thought twisted in her mind. She had seen the look in Rachel's eyes as she walked out. It had not been the look of a guilty person running away. It had been the look of someone breaking a chain. For the first time, something that sounded like doubt knocked at the door of Linda's heart. She ignored it and turned up the volume. Daniel arrived home late, his shoulders hunched, his eyes rimmed with red. He slammed the door shut and leaned against it, breathing heavily. Linda jumped up. "Did you stop her?" she demanded. "Did you make her come back before she did something stupid?" He sank onto a chair and put his head in his hands. "No," he said weakly. "I was too late, she signed." "Of course she did," Linda snapped. "She never listens, always thinks she knows best. Now she's gone and given her company to strangers." He slowly raised his head. "You don't understand," he said quietly. "She didn't lose anything, she gained everything. She sits at the top of that company now, they respect her, they listen to her. I walked into that room and I was nobody." He let out a hollow laugh. "I used to think I was the big man in our house, that I was the one carrying us, but in that room I realized I am small." The words tasted bitter, but they were true. Linda's face twisted. "You're only saying that because you're upset. She is still your wife, she still must listen to you." Daniel stared at the floor. "I told her if she walked out the door not to come back," he whispered. "And she left. Then she signed a contract that changed her life. She doesn't need me now." Linda moved closer, angry and scared. "She will come back," she insisted. "Women like that always come back crying. She will see that money isn't everything. She will see she needs her husband and his family. You'll see. Wait till all this online noise dies down." Daniel didn't answer. Deep inside, he felt something break. He thought of the way Rachel had looked at him when he said, "Don't come back." It wasn't a look that promised she would return. It was a look that said she had finally understood her own value. He stood and walked to the window, pulling back the curtain. Across the street, he saw the neighbor who had the security camera hurrying into a car. The man glanced up, met Daniel's eyes quickly, then looked away with guilt. That was when Daniel understood. "It was him," he said softly. "He recorded it, he leaked it." Linda snorted. "Then we will deal with him." But the more she spoke, the more Daniel felt tired. Tired of making excuses, tired of blaming everyone except himself, tired of a life built on ego and lies. Back in the hotel, night had started to fall. The sky outside Rachel's window was painted with shades of orange and pink. She sat at the desk in the suite, a fresh notebook open in front of her and a pen in her hand. Instead of writing code or contract notes, she wrote something different now. She wrote a list. At the top, she wrote 3 simple words: what happens next? Under it, she started listing things. 1. Change address on all official documents. 2. Meet with lawyers about house. 3. Talk to firms PR about speaking out. 4. Call my mother. 5. Rest. She stared at the word house for a long time. When she and Daniel first bought it, they had been so excited. They had spent weekends choosing paint colors and arguing about where the couch should go. She had planted a small flower in a pot by the front steps, telling herself it was a symbol of new beginnings. Now when she thought of that house, she didn't see warm dinners or laughter. She saw a bucket. She saw a woman in the corner smiling at her pain. She heard the words, "If you go, stay gone." She tapped the pen against the page. When she spoke to Nora earlier, Nora had reminded her of something important. Because of how the business was structured and how things had been financed, the house was technically in Rachel's name. They had done it that way to protect it when Daniel's debts first got heavy. It had seemed like a small legal trick then. Now it was a quiet piece of power. She picked up her phone and called Nora. "We need to talk about the house deed," she said when Nora answered. "I want to make sure my name stays on it. I want to decide what happens to it." Nora replied, "Of course, we can adjust everything now that the deal is done. You can rent it, sell it, or," she paused, "do something else." Rachel looked out at the lights turning on in the city. "I don't want to act from anger," she said slowly. "But I also don't want to protect people who enjoy breaking others. Let's just say I want that place to reflect truth, not lies." They agreed to meet the next morning with legal documents. After the call, Rachel lay back on the bed and stared at the ceiling. For the first time in a long time, she let herself think about the kind of life she wanted. Not a life where she had to prove her worth every day. Not a life where love was something she had to beg for. A life where peace was normal, not a rare visitor. A life where her work and her heart could both breathe. Somewhere deep inside, she knew that meant her marriage, at least in its current form, could not continue. Maybe one day she and Daniel would talk. Maybe they would find some way to be calm in the same room again. But she knew one thing with painful clarity: she could never go back to being the woman who apologized for growing. Later that night, as she scrolled through her phone, she saw a new notification from a news channel. They had picked up the story and were asking if she would agree to a live interview about her journey from small apartment to billion-dollar deal. They did not mention the video directly, but she knew they were expecting to talk about it. She stared at the message, her thumb hovering over the screen. Then she typed, "Yes, I will come, but I will choose what to talk about." She hit send before fear could stop her. She did not want to be known only as the woman who was humiliated. She wanted to be known as the woman who walked away and still succeeded. She wanted to take the sharp weapon that had been used against her and turn it into a tool that helped others. Far away, in the living room that still smelled faintly of dirty water, Linda flipped through channels until she landed on a talk show where the host was already discussing Rachel's story. "We've all seen the video," the host said. "But what many people don't realize is that this woman is not just any woman. She's the brain behind a tech company just acquired for $10 billion. She walked out on a husband who didn't respect her and hours later walked into a deal most people can only dream of. Tonight we ask, what does self-respect really look like?" Linda's face tight. She threw the remote down. "They're making her look like some kind of star," she muttered. "They don't know how rude she could be. They don't know how she talked back to me sometimes." But her words sounded weak even to her own ears. In the corner of her mind, she remembered the quiet way Rachel always cooked extra for her, the way she made sure Linda's room was warm in the cold months, the way she never complained when Linda changed the TV channel mid-show. She remembered the look in Rachel's eyes that morning. The mixture of pain and strength. For a brief moment, a strange thought came to her. Maybe I pushed too far. The thought scared her. It meant admitting fault. So she shoved it down and called one of her friends instead to complain about ungrateful young wives. Daniel lay awake in the bedroom he once shared with Rachel. The bed felt too big, the air too heavy. He held his phone in his hand, scrolling through comments under the video. Some called him a monster, some called him trash. Some said, "This is why smart women don't tell their partners about their dreams." He winced at each one, then he saw one comment that hit harder than the rest. It said, "The sad thing is he thought he was punishing her. He didn't realize he was setting her free." He tossed the phone aside and stared at the ceiling, his mind full of memories. Rachel bringing him food when he was sick, Rachel staying up late to help him type reports, Rachel smiling softly when he joked about her little project. He remembered all the times she had asked him to listen, really listen, and he had chosen to watch TV instead or scroll through his own phone. "What have I done?" he whispered to the empty room. The silence had no answer. The next morning, the sun rose on a city that already knew Rachel Carter's name. In the hotel suite, she dressed in fresh clothes, a simple white blouse and dark pants with a soft blue jacket. Her hair was dry now, brushed and pinned back from her face. She looked at herself in the mirror and saw someone new. Not because of the clothes, not because of the money, but because of the weight she had dropped when she walked out of that house. Her eyes were still the same shape, but they were clearer. Her shoulders still the same, but they held themselves differently. Nora met her in the lobby with a stack of documents and a plan. They sat together in a quiet corner while the lawyer explained the new arrangements. The house would remain in Rachel's name. She would have full legal control. If she decided to sell it, she could. If she decided to rent it, she could. She could even give Daniel time to move out, but only on her terms. It was a strange feeling having the power to decide the fate of a place that had once made her feel so trapped. She signed each paper after reading it carefully, making sure she understood every line. This time, the signatures were not heavy. They were light. They felt like doors opening. When they were done, Nora looked at her. "There's one more thing," she said. "The news channel called again. They want to move the interview up. They think the story is hottest now. They're asking if you can come in later today." Rachel's stomach fluttered, but she nodded. "I'll go," she said softly. "If I wait too long, I'll overthink it. I'd rather speak while the fire is still burning." "Are you sure?" Nora asked. "You don't have to do this." "I know," Rachel replied. "But if the world is going to talk about me anyway, I want them to hear my voice at least once. I want some young girl watching to know that walking away from disrespect is not failure, it's wisdom." Nora smiled. "Then let's get you ready." They spent the next hours planning. They chose simple, honest things for her to say. No dramatic speech, just truth. She would talk about Bright Path, about building in silence, about staying kind in a hard world. She would also talk gently, without shouting, about the danger of letting anyone convince you that you are small. By late afternoon, Rachel was in the back of a car again, heading not to a boardroom this time, but to a TV studio. Lights from billboards flashed across the windows. People walked past wearing headphones, carrying bags, laughing, arguing. Somewhere among them, people were also sharing her story, arguing about it, learning from it, twisting it. She could not control all of that, but she could choose what came out of her own mouth. As the driver turned onto the street where the studio stood, her phone buzzed with a new message. For a second, she thought about ignoring it, but something made her look. It was from Daniel. The message was long, but the beginning caught her breath. "I know I don't deserve to say anything after what I did," it read, "but I'm begging you to at least read this. I watched the video again, not as a hurt man, but as if it was someone else. I saw my face, I saw my mother, I saw you, I was ashamed. I understand now that I broke something that may never be fixed. If you never come back, I will accept it. I just want to say I'm sorry, truly. Not because the world hates me now, but because I see how much I didn't see. You were building a future for us and I poured dirt on it. If you let me, I will sign whatever papers you want. If you want the house, the car, everything, it's yours. You earned it. I just hope one day you can remember a version of me that wasn't this." Her chest tightened. Tears burned again. This time there was no anger in his words, only regret. She could feel that he had seen something he could not unsee. She typed slowly, choosing each word carefully. "I see your message," she wrote. "I believe that you are sorry, but some things that are broken do not go back to how they were. I don't want the house or the car as revenge. I want them because I built more than you know. I wish things had been different. I hope you learn from this, not just for me, but for whoever is in your life in the future. For now, I need distance." She sent it and placed the phone face down on her lap. It hurt, but it was clean pain, not the messy confusion of before. The car stopped outside the studio. Bright lights, cameras, and a red carpet waited. A producer hurried out to greet her, shaking her hand warmly. "We're honored to have you," he said. "The whole country is watching." Inside, makeup artists fixed small details, a sound worker clipped a microphone to her jacket, and someone gave her a glass of water. The host of the show, a woman with kind eyes and a strong voice, came backstage to meet her. "I promise I won't push you to share more than you want," the host said. "Say what feels right, this is your story." As Rachel sat in the chair waiting to be called on stage, she took one more deep breath. She remembered the list in her notebook, what happens next. She realized she was already living it. The assistant counted down with fingers. 3, 2, 1, the host smiled into the camera and said, "Tonight we have with us a woman whose story has shaken the internet and inspired millions. She walked out on disrespect and walked into a $10 billion deal on the same day. Please welcome, live in the studio, Ms. Rachel Carter." The audience clapped. Rachel stood and walked onto the stage, the bright studio lights flooding her vision. Somewhere in a small house on a quiet street, Daniel and Linda sat in front of their TV, watching. Somewhere in tiny shops and big offices and small apartments, people all over the country and beyond watched too. They leaned closer to the screen as she sat down in the chair opposite the host, smoothed her jacket, and looked straight into the camera with steady eyes. She was about to open her mouth and speak, not just for herself, but for every silent person who had ever been made to feel small in their own home. She was ready. But the first words that came out of her mouth would not just change the way people saw her. They would decide how the world would treat Daniel and Linda from that day forward. What she chose to say or not say would shape everything that came next. And with the whole world leaning in to hear, the next sentence that left her lips would either crush her past or quietly set it free in a way nobody expected. The studio lights glowed warmly on Rachel's face as she sat in the chair across from the host, her hands resting calmly on her lap, her back straight, her heart steady in a way she had not felt in years. The cameras pointed at her like 1,000 eyes, silent and expectant. The audience seated just beyond the lights leaned forward with quiet anticipation. Behind the cameras, the producers watched every movement, every breath. It felt as if the entire world had stopped to hear what she would say. The host offered her a gentle smile, one that said, "You are safe here." Then she turned to the camera and began the segment. "Thank you all for joining us tonight," she said warmly. "We have with us a woman whose name has become a symbol of courage across the country and beyond. You've seen the headlines, you've seen the stories spreading everywhere. But tonight you will hear her voice, her truth directly. Please welcome Ms. Rachel Carter." The audience clapped again, not loud but full of respect. The kind of applause people give to someone who walked through fire and came out standing. When the host turned to Rachel again, she asked the first question gently. "Rachel, how are you feeling tonight?" It was simple, soft, not invasive. Rachel paused for a moment, letting the question settle inside her before answering. Her voice was calm, steady, and clearer than it had ever been. "I'm tired," she said honestly, "but I'm grateful and I'm stronger today than I was yesterday." The host nodded. "Millions of people saw what happened in your home, and then millions more saw you walk into a $10 billion deal the same day. People are calling you the definition of strength. But before we talk about the deal, I want to ask something important. When the world saw that video, what was going through your mind?" Rachel inhaled slowly. Her eyes glistened under the light, but they did not break. She looked directly at the camera, speaking to the people watching from living rooms, offices, shops, small apartments, people she would never meet but who needed to hear her in that exact moment. "When I saw the video," she said softly, "I didn't see a weak woman. I saw a woman who stayed too long in a place where she was shrinking. I saw someone who kept trying to hold everything together while everything around her was breaking. I saw someone who kept choosing peace even when she received pain. But most of all, I saw a woman who deserved better, and I realized something important. If I didn't walk away that morning, I might never have walked away at all." The audience sat in perfect silence. Even the cameras seemed to hold their breath. Rachel continued, her voice gaining quiet strength. "A lot of people think strength is loud. They think it's shouting, fighting, arguing, but sometimes strength is silent. Sometimes strength is picking up your bag, wiping your face, and walking out the door without looking back." A woman in the audience wiped a tear from her cheek. The host leaned forward slightly. "When you walked out of that house and got into the taxi, did you know what you were walking into?" Rachel shook her head gently. "No," she said. "I didn't know what would happen next. I just knew I couldn't stay where I was. I didn't know the video existed. I didn't know the world was about to see what happened. I just knew I had a choice, stay broken or step into the unknown." She paused, her eyes drifting for a moment, remembering the cold water dripping down her face, the humiliation, the pain. Then she looked back up. "I chose the unknown," the host nodded slowly. "And the unknown led you straight into a room of business leaders waiting to sign one of the biggest deals in tech history." "Yes," Rachel said with a faint smile. "Life is strange like that. Sometimes the doors we think are closing are actually pushing us toward better ones." The host took a breath and then carefully asked the question the whole world had been waiting for. "Rachel, do you blame your husband?" The audience shifted slightly in their seats. The studio airtight, even the crew behind the cameras leaned closer. Rachel remained still for a moment. Her eyes softened, not with love but with the maturity of someone who had walked through deep pain and come out wiser. "I don't blame him," she said slowly. "I don't excuse what he did. It was wrong, it was hurtful, it was cruel, but blame doesn't heal anything. Blame doesn't rebuild anything. Blame doesn't free you. Blame keeps you tied to the place you are trying to escape." Her voice deepened slightly with emotion. "I don't want to carry anger. I don't want to carry hate. I want to carry lessons." The host nodded, visibly moved. "That's powerful," she whispered. Rachel continued. "When someone shows you how little they value your heart, you don't stay to convince them. You leave to protect yourself. I learned that the hard way." A ripple of emotion moved through the audience. Some nodded, some wiped tears. The host gently asked, "And what about the deal? Did the humiliation make it harder to focus?" "It made it clearer," Rachel answered. "Walking into that boardroom soaked and embarrassed forced me to see myself differently. I wasn't just a wife anymore. I wasn't just someone hopping to be loved. I was a woman who built something valuable with her own hands, and no amount of dirty water could wash that away." The room erupted in gentle applause. The host smiled. "So many people see you as a symbol now, a symbol of walking away, a symbol of courage, a symbol of choosing yourself. What do you want them to learn from your story?" Rachel took a deep breath and spoke slowly, carefully, like each word mattered. I want people to know this. You don't need permission to walk away from what hurts you. You don't owe anyone your silence. You don't have to shrink to make someone else feel bigger. You don't have to prove your worth to people who refuse to see it. She paused and lowered her voice. You are allowed to outgrow people. You are allowed to choose peace. You are allowed to start over. You are allowed to win after being broken. Tears welled in the eyes of several audience members. The host's voice cracked slightly as she said, "Thank you for saying that." Rachel smiled softly, but the quiet strength in her expression did not fade. The interview continued with questions about BrightPath Systems, her plans for expansion, the new leadership role she would take under Lawson Global, and how she intended to use her platform to support people going through silent struggles. By the time the segment came to an end, the audience rose to their feet in a standing ovation. Rachel stood as well, slightly overwhelmed but grateful. The host hugged her lightly. "Thank you for your courage," she whispered. "You just changed lives tonight." Rachel smiled, her eyes bright. "I hope so." When she walked backstage, her phone exploded with new notifications, messages from strangers thanking her. Messages from women and men saying her words gave them bravery, messages from people who had been quietly suffering saying they finally felt seen. But among the hundreds of messages, one stood out. It was from Daniel. The message was long, but the first line made her heart clench. "I watched your interview," it read. "I've never seen you shine like that. I'm sorry I didn't let you shine when you were with me." She read the entire message silently. He apologized deeply. He admitted his flaws. He accepted responsibility. He said he would not ask her to return, only that he hoped life would be kind to her. He ended with, "I hope one day you find someone who treats your heart the way it deserves." Rachel closed the message slowly. A tear slid down her cheek, not from sadness but from release, quiet release. She typed back, "Thank you for saying that. I wish you healing. I wish you peace. I wish you growth, but I am not coming back." She hit send. Meanwhile, in the small house on the quiet street, the video continued looping on television screens. But something had changed. Neighbors who once smiled politely at Linda now crossed the street to avoid her. At the market, whispers followed her like shadows. People pointed, people judged, people stared. When she returned home, Daniel was sitting at the table with his head in his hands. She sat across from him quietly. For the first time, she saw her son not as a boy she needed to protect, but as a man she had helped break. "Maybe," she whispered reluctantly, "maybe we were wrong." Daniel did not lift his head. "Mom," he said softly, "we didn't just make a mistake, we destroyed something precious." He finally looked up, his eyes tired and red. "And she didn't deserve it." Linda wanted to argue, wanted to defend herself, wanted to insult Rachel again, but she couldn't. Not after seeing the whole world stand behind the woman she had laughed at. Not after seeing the quiet strength in Rachel's interview. Not after hearing millions of people calling Rachel brave. Linda swallowed hard. For once, she said nothing. Back in the hotel suite later that night, Rachel stepped onto the balcony and looked out over the city. The wind lifted her hair gently. The lights below looked like stars fallen to earth. She wrapped her arms around herself, not from cold but from a deep sense of completion. She had walked through fire, she had survived humiliation, she had rebuilt herself, she had spoken her truth, and she had walked into a future that belonged to her alone. She thought of the girl she used to be, the girl who worked late in silent rooms, who waited for love, who hid her dreams, who apologized for existing. She smiled softly. That girl had grown, that girl had learned, that girl had risen. Her phone buzzed again, this time from Grant. "The world loved your interview," he wrote. "Tomorrow we begin the next chapter. BrightPath will lead programs for small business owners nationwide. You will head the project. Are you ready?" Rachel typed back, "Yes, I'm ready." She placed the phone down and looked up at the sky. The moon shone above her like a quiet blessing. She whispered into the night, "Thank you for showing me who I am." The next morning, as sunlight warmed the city, Rachel packed her things slowly. She was moving to a new apartment arranged temporarily by the company, safe, private, peaceful. She left the hotel room tidy, closed the door behind her, and stepped into the hallway with a steady heart. The elevator chimed softly as she descended. When the doors opened, she walked into the bright lobby, smiling at the staff who greeted her with warmth and respect. She stepped outside into the morning air, fresh and crisp. For the first time in a very long time, she felt fully alive. She hailed a taxi, slid into the back seat, and whispered an address. The driver nodded and pulled into the street. As the car moved forward, Rachel turned her head to the window and watched the hotel fade behind her. She was not going backward, she was not standing still. She was moving forward, upward, freely. Because the woman who walked through dirty water had washed the pain away, and the woman who stepped out the door had walked into her future, and the world that watched her rise would never forget her name. Please subscribe to this channel to support our growth. Thank you for watching this life-changing story.